The house was still, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards, which I hoped was just the house settling. I sat in the living room, the clock on the wall ticking louder than it ever had before, the hands crawling toward midnight. All the lights were off, except for the faint glow of a lamp in the corner. The dimness made every shadow feel alive. My gaze kept drifting to the window, the curtains drawn tight. Somewhere beyond them, the neighbor's house loomed. I glanced at my phone, 11:48 p.m. The closer it got to midnight, the harder it was to sit still. I wasn't sure if staking out my own living room counted as normal. 11:57 p.m. I was leaning forward now, elbows on my knees, staring at the window. 11:59 p.m. A faint noise broke through the quiet, soft, rhythmic, and familiar. Talking. I froze. The voices were faint, muffled by the walls and distance, but they were there. It wasn't coming from the street, it was coming from the neighbor's yard. The clock hit 12 o'clock. Midnight. The voices grew louder. I rose slowly, moving toward the window. My hand hesitated over the curtain, the weight of Marina's warnings suddenly feeling very real. I could just go back to the couch, sit down, and let it pass. Whatever it was. But I didn't. I pulled the curtain back a sliver, just enough to see. At first, there was nothing. Just the dark outline of their yard and the faint glow of a porch light. But then I noticed movement near the edge of their property. Shapes, shifting and swaying in the shadows, just out of reach of the light. Then, just as I chalked it up to my imagination, there was something crouched low to the ground. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall, barely catching myself before falling flat on the floor. And then, as abruptly as it had started, the voices stopped. I waited, straining to hear anything, but there was nothing. For a moment, I relaxed, thinking it was over. Then came the knock at my door. I made my way over to the door and steadied myself against the doorframe, my breath shallow and uneven. Dizziness threatened to knock me out, but I forced myself to grip the doorknob and pull it open. Marina stood there, her expression sharp, a camera slung in her hand. "Jack, I told you to meet me at the driveway," she said, her voice clipped. "What are you still doing in here?" The words caught in my throat. I heard something. I saw something. Didn't you see it? Her brows knit together as she glanced toward the house. See what? I didn't see anything. It's creepy as ever, but I didn't see anything unusual. I said, shaking my head. I heard the voices again, and then I saw something. I don't even know how to describe it. How could you not have seen it? Marina exhaled through her nose. Whatever it was, it's not here now. If you're sure about what you heard, or think you saw, then this just proves it's the perfect time to do something. To do something. Yes. Knock on the door, remember. I hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe we should. Jack, she interrupted. If we don't do this now, this is all just another story no one's going to believe. You want answers? So do I. As she turned to head toward the neighbor's house, she paused, glancing back at me. Come on, she said over her shoulder. Let's do this. I hesitated, taking a single step forward before realizing my hand was hovering just above Marina's arm. You're sure about this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes. Her tight, humorless smile flickered across her face. But I don't think you are. I frowned. What makes you say that? Because you're still standing there, she said with a soft laugh, nodding toward my hand about to grab her arm. And you're about to try and stop me. Her words hit harder than I expected. She was right. Marina whipped around, heading toward the house, her confidence just barely convincing enough to make me follow. When we made it to the front door of the house, I stood beside her, my pulse hammering in my ears. She looked at me, wide-eyed with curiosity and impatience. I raised my hand to the door and gave it 2 sharp knocks. The sound echoed loudly in the still of the night. For a moment, nothing happened. The house was still, and I let out a shaky breath. But then I heard it. Faint at first, the voices came again, low, garbled murmurs. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice cracking. Marina nodded, her face going pale. "Yeah, I hear it." The voices were coming from behind the door, but not in any way that made sense. They weren't close or far, they were inside the door itself, like the wood was breathing them out. My hand moved before I could stop it, my palm stretched out and pressed against the door. The surface was cold and damp, and I swear I felt it hum beneath my fingers. "Jack," Marina whispered harshly, grabbing my arm. "What are you doing?" I opened my mouth to answer, but a creak from the door cut me off. We both froze as it shifted, opening just enough to reveal a thin sliver of blackness. It wasn't the darkness of a poorly lit room, it was a void, a place where light disappeared. "Hello," Marina called, her voice slightly trembling. "Is someone there?" The voices stopped abruptly. I squinted, trying to recognize any familiar shapes within the gap. Was that movement? A shadow? A person? I stepped back. "Something isn't right," I whispered. "Let's go." But she didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed on the door, where the void pressed against reality. Marina stepped forward, her hand brushing past me to shove the door open wider. "We're not leaving," she hissed, her voice steadier than I expected. "Not until we know what's going on in there." I grabbed her arm. "Marina, this isn't normal. This door doesn't lead to a living room. It's something else." "That's exactly why we need to keep going," she snapped, shaking me off. "I'm not letting them write me off as crazy again. Not this time." I swallowed hard, glancing back at the blackness seeping out of the open doorway. It felt alive, like it was pulling at us, daring us to step inside. My instincts screamed at me to drag her out, to run, but she was already getting her camera ready, the lens gleaming faintly in the dim light. "You really want to walk into that?" I gestured inside the house, my voice cracking. "Yes," she said, "because if we don't, we'll never know." Although I thought this was a horrible idea, I did want to know what was going on. The voices, the strange things I'd seen, all of it had me hooked. The only way to make sense of all this was to go inside. Marina pushed the door open further, the creak echoing into the house. The void seemed to expand, stretching like ink spreading through water, swallowing the faint light spilling from the street lamps outside. "Are you recording this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I am," she said, stepping over the threshold. She turned to look at me, her eyes hard, determined. "You weren't the one that got put in a mental institution, Jack. But soon you will if you keep talking about this and not having any proof." Before I could reply, she took another step inside. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the voices started again, low, guttural murmurs that twisted and folded in on themselves. It was like they were coming from every direction, vibrating through the walls. "Do you hear them?" Marina whispered, her voice tinged with something between fear and exhilaration. "I hear them," I said, my mouth dry. She turned the camera toward the void, the faint red light of the recording indicator barely piercing the blackness. "Whatever this is," she murmured, "it's real. It's all real." The words weren't comforting. If anything, they made it worse, but I think she was trying to prove it to herself, and to whoever watches the tape one day. I think in a weird way, this was making her feel relieved. She walked further inside, vanishing into the darkness. I followed her, my feet slow, cautious, like the ground might give way beneath me any second. I snapped my head up, realizing I'd been focused so intently on my feet that I had lost sight of Marina. Marina! I called out, my voice shaking. Where are you? A low hum answered me, but no voice. I took another step, and something clicked under my foot, a loud snap that echoed through the hall. That's when I saw it, the faintest outline of her, standing at the far end of the room, her back to me. She was staring at something. The shadows around her seemed to stretch and shift like they were alive, pulsating with something dark. Marina, I said again, louder this time, as panic started to take hold. She didn't turn, didn't move. She just stood there, frozen. I stepped closer, but every inch I moved felt like I was sinking deeper into the dark. The temperature had dropped, and my breath came out in sharp, visible gasps. The air around me pressed in, thick and suffocating. I was almost to her when I saw a flash of movement from the corner of my eye. I spun around, my heart in my throat. But there was nothing there. The whispers had grown louder, a chorus of voices now. When I turned back around, Marina was an eyelash length away from my face. Her face was a shade of dry cement mixed with green bile. Her mouth hung wide and crooked as if someone had broken it from the inside. The veins in her face bulged out, a sharp breath away from popping. The stench she gave off came straight from hell itself, burning flesh and coagulated blood. I stumbled back, grabbing the camera out of her hands and pointing it at her as I fell onto the floor. My mind screamed at me to move, but my legs were paralyzed, as if rooted to the spot by the grotesque image before me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Marina's eyes, wide and vacant, locked onto mine. Her pupils were huge black holes, swallowed up by something far worse than mere darkness. Then, just as quickly as she had appeared, her head jerked to the side, as though she'd heard something. No, felt something. She stood perfectly still for a long moment. Then her mouth twitched, and the faintest of smiles curled up at the corners of her lips, though it was nothing like the one I had seen before. It was as if her body couldn't remember how to smile, but it was trying anyway. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't her. This wasn't Marina. Marina! My voice finally cut through the silence, trembling with fear. Her smile widened, impossibly wide, like it wanted to devour everything around it. The moment she spoke, her voice was a guttural rasp, barely human. You're not crazy, you know. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unnatural. I can prove it to you now.